Breaking his silence, the man at the heart of one of the biggest retail collapses in British history speaks exclusively to News at 10. Sir Philip Green tells our political editor Robert Peston that he made an honest mistake in selling the stores, but he'll fix it.
How sad and very, very, very sorry I am for all the hardship and sort of sadness caused to all the people that work there, also the pensioners.
But we ask, can he really plug the deepening pension black hole, which tonight is thought to be more than £700 million? Also on News at 10 tonight, the horrific murder of the mother and daughter stabbed to death by Britain's youngest couple ever to commit murder.
What makes this case even more shocking is that these two were 14 years of age when they planned, committed these callous, senseless and unprovoked attacks.
The coalition forces trying to drive so-called IS fighters out of its last major stronghold in Iraq say the noose is tightening around the extremists. Clothes, petrol and hotels and restaurant bills push inflation up. The advice tonight, start your Christmas shopping early.
This is ITV News at 10 with Raghi Omar.
Good evening. The collapse of BHS was one of the worst high street losses in the country's history. Thousands of people lost their jobs, a massive hole was left in the pension funds they were relying on, and there were accusations BHS was asset stripped before one of the oldest names in British fashion was sold for £1. Today, the man at the centre of it all has spoken to us about how he will put his version of the story. In his first interview since he told MPs he would fix the pension problem, the company's former owner, Sir Philip Green, spoke to Robert Peston. He made his first proper apology to BHS staff for selling the company to what he called a bad buyer. And he hit back at the Prime Minister, who singled him out in her party conference speech, accusing her of not knowing her facts. When BHS collapsed in April, it was employing 11,000 people, full-time and part-time. Most have since lost their jobs. 20,000 BHS pensioners are still worrying what is going to happen to their pension funds. Some believe the black hole in the BHS pension scheme is now more than £700 million. While that sounds an awful lot of money, it isn't for one of the UK's wealthiest billionaires. Here then, in a specially extended interview, is Sir Philip talking to Robert Peston.
Sir Philip Green, the multi-billionaire owner of Topshop, who seemed to have it all, now battling to save his reputation and knighthood following the collapse in April of BHS. The famous high street name he bought for £200 million in 2000 and sold for £1 last year.
That's the hot seat, is it?
That's the hot seat. Great. You owned BHS for 15 years. It's now been closed down. What have you got to say to those who worked for the business and those who are worried about their pensions?
Well, obviously, and I want to start with you by saying, you know, how sad and very, very, very sorry I am for all the hardship and sort of sadness caused to all the people that work there, also the pensioners. I hope and believe all the people that worked with me very closely at BHS over those years, and some through the whole journey, will know it was never my intention for the business to have the ending it did. Unfortunately, lots of sad circumstances occurred. But the starting point of this is, I am sorry for where we've landed.
11,000 jobs gone.
There are actually about 8,500 people. Everybody's always recorded 11. And from what I'm told, quite a large percentage of the high street workforce are actually part-time. So full-time workers actually was substantially less than the number I was quoted. And I think I can honestly say that I and my team, we did everything possible to actually not have the business go into receivership administration.
Now, the collapse of BHS left BHS's 2 pension schemes with a black hole of more than £571 million. Are you going to stand behind the pension fund?
We are in very strong dialogue with the regulator for a solution. The commitment I made at the Select Committee stands. I said I would do my best and to find a solution, and that's what we continue to do. And I am hopeful that we've got some light in the tunnel to a solution.
Would the plan be for you ultimately to stand behind the pension fund rather than it falling into the pension protection fund, which is the official rescue?
Right. If we arrive at the place where we hope to arrive, there will be no requirement for the PPF.
For the pension protection fund to provide any money?
Correct.
And I know you don't want to put a precise number on the support that you would give.
Well, I can't.
But presumably we're talking about hundreds of millions of pounds, aren't we?
I can't get into a conversation.
You can't even say hundreds of millions of pounds.
I can't get I can't get into a conversation with you about any of the detail.
Really? But that's not a detail. That's ballpark, isn't it?
Robert.
Okay.
The answer is it will take what it takes to resolve it. Okay?
Yeah.
We are in that discussion.
But the fundamental point is your plan is to rescue the fund and it not to be looked after by the pension protection fund.
Yes.
And do you have any sense of how long it's likely to take to bring that to fruition? Because it's been quite a long time and pensioners are anxious.
Well, it has and it hasn't. Right? You know, if we actually go how long it's been, right, it's actually only been maybe 3 months. Right? It seems like that, 3 or 4 months.
Well, April was when the business went bust, wasn't it?
Yeah, but at that point we were not engaged in this till a little bit after that. There were many conversations previously going on. The misery of dealing with this on a daily basis is not fun. Can't run our business.
You have got the money to do it. The reason you haven't fixed it is not because you haven't got the money.
I hope not. Right. What I'd rather say is this: there has been no conversation with anybody involved in this who doesn't believe that the funding will be made available, right, to fix it. So it's not about funds. It's not about funds available. Absolutely not. No.
Ah, yes, the funds, the wealth, whose most conspicuous manifestation is his lavish, huge yacht. And, in the old days, a bit of swanking around in fancy dress with some famous faces. Now, not his friend is Frank Field, chairman of the Work and Pensions Committee, who's particularly exercised that Green's family pocketed tax-free dividends from BHS of £307 million between 2002 and 2005. Frank Field accused you of plundering BHS, and it is true that your family benefited to the tune of more than £300 million from dividends out of BHS. He's right, isn't he?
Well, in terms of factually, did dividends get paid out of BHS? Yes, they did. They got paid out of retained earnings, right? The company, I believe, in those years paid £180 million in corporation tax. It wasn't from borrowed money. It was money the company actually made. It made several hundred million. But Frank Field never wants to deal with the facts. And even when my executives were there trying to explain the numbers to various of his parliamentary colleagues, nobody wanted to listen. We invited them to our office. They've never bothered to come for a meeting. But to put this record 100% straight, after the last dividend was paid, we invested £350 million in capital expenditure in the business. We then lent the business, unsecured, with no interest, a further 256 million. So that gets us to 600. And then, plus or minus, we gave RAL, the purchaser, the buyer of BHS, we gave RAL, in terms of asset and cash, a short 200 million. So I think, I don't know how good your maths was at school, Robert.
So I can add that.
Took out 300, put in 800, right? So basically, we supported this business over all those years. So
just to be absolutely clear, your own conscience is completely clear on this. You took a dividend from a business that was successful at the time. How do you yourself, because obviously you've had to think about this, explain then why BHS turned from a successful business to a more struggling business?
I mean, sort of the short version was, I mean, and not making any excuses, BHS historically had, long before my time, before I bought it, had a lot of leases that were signed many years back, expensive, the sort of the whole pricing in that middle market became much more aggressive. The online revolution started, and principally, maybe there's obviously things we may or may not have done wrong.
BHS went bust a year after Philip Green sold it to former bankrupt Dominic Chappell. Did Green run away from a business he knew was failing? Why did you decide to sell at the time you did?
I think we put a lot of money into it. The marketplace is very, very, very competitive. We've got 7 other businesses that need energy concentration. We've now got shops across 30 countries. A lot more work today to drive these businesses hard. And it was just felt that our energies and our effort would be better spent driving the other business. We thought gone as far as we thought we could go, and therefore best to move on.
You've explained, though, that you felt that the business did have some serious problems.
Yes.
Did you think about closing it yourself?
I mean, the answer is, I felt if we could avoid doing that, that's what I wanted to do. Therefore, we sort of looked at all the different options, and I just felt possibly if somebody had a clean bill of health, they knew they would have to go and do deals with landlords. So that wasn't a secret. There was very extensive due diligence carried out by Grant Thornton.
So Grant Thornton advising the buyer?
Advising the buyer with very detailed due diligence. Olswang, who were...
Also advising the buyer?
Advising the buyer, pretty aggressive in their work for the buyer. Both of these 2 firms are both well-regarded professional firms. They weren't afraid to charge. They charged $8.4 million for their services. They never got in, these 2 companies, advisors, never got interviewed by the select committee, or the correct people didn't get interviewed by the select committee. We felt with 2 prominent advisors, there was a good opportunity for somebody to take the business forward with money that was provided and give it a fresh start. Unfortunately, that didn't work out.
Of all the business leaders I've met, you are probably the most hands-on, somebody who pays more attention to detail than almost any business person I've met. Dominic Chappell, if you were to look at his track record, former bankrupt, no experience of retailing, I am surprised that you felt he was the right person to buy the business.
Well, I don't want to make an excuse. He was clearly, categorically the wrong buyer, okay? However, I felt he was keeping the management team on board. The management team knew exactly what had to be done to the business. Like I said, I'm not hiding at all. He was a bad buyer, wrong buyer. But we made that decision, and for the last year, and on a daily basis, I and my family have got to live with this horrid decision. And trust me, these are not fun days. I've been doing this, as you said, a very, very, very long time. And sadly, it's all suddenly sort of squeezed into, the only thing in the world is BHS. This has been a horrible, horrible, horrible period.
How's it been for you and your family? You've had photographers outside the whole time. There's sort of very critical stuff written about you pretty much every day in the press. How does that feel?
Well, it's horrible. But at the end of the day, Robert, I haven't run away. I'm here. I'm sitting here with you. I can happily look you straight in the eye. I want to fix this pension solution more than anybody in the world, right? I believe with goodwill on both sides, we can fix it. And the fact that nobody ever has come to the table to fix a pension, it's interesting they've picked on me. But anyway, we're here.
2005, those were the days. Sir Philip knighted for services to retailing. Some want him to become plain Mr. Green again. MPs have got this debate later this week. They have a vote about whether or not your knighthood should be taken.
For what? Well, first of all,
which they obviously haven't got the power to do that. Right. But you care about the knighthood.
I think I care about how these people are behaving, right? All hiding behind parliamentary privilege, which I don't think that's what it was designed for, and just the way they're going about it, trying to bully everybody. It's almost inconceivable that nobody from that committee wanted to visit this office and actually go through some of the detail I briefly went through with you.
But one of the things I think I know about you is you hate to fail. This is the first big setback you've had in years. Mm-hmm. How do you sort of rationalise it for yourself? How do you come to terms with it for yourself?
I come to terms with it because I can look in the mirror and know I made a bad mistake, but I did it honestly. The easy route would have been, which other people have done, would have been to admin it, pre-pack it, repackage it myself. Right?
So you're explicitly saying you did not cut and run, which is the allegation that's made at...
Well, even at the end, where they were trying to sell it to different buyers, and I sort of thought, should I buy it back? And then sort of we sat and discussed it and thought, is that going to be worse than what's the right decision?
13 days ago.
A director who takes out massive dividends while knowing that the company pension is about to go bust.
Who was she talking about? I mean, it's an extraordinary change of fortune for you. If back in 2010, David Cameron, the Prime Minister, calls you in and asks you to advise him on making government more efficient. Theresa May makes what is, frankly, an attack on you in her conference speech.
I don't want to get into the debate of what the new Prime Minister said. I think, hopefully, we will send a letter apropos some of the things I've told you, and just understand we didn't take a load of dividends before the company failed. Right? We ran the business. Nobody can be a clairvoyant. So to be accused of, we took all the... But it's easy to say these things. Got an easy audience listening without knowing all the facts. So I think we need to correct those facts.
And just to be clear, your priority right now is what exactly?
Well, my priority is I'd like to call you up tomorrow and say we've made a proposal to the regulator and hopefully we're going to get finished. So my priority is to finish this because, to be honest with you, the stress and aggravation of doing all of this. Maybe one last thing I was thinking about, should I or shouldn't I tell you? 6 days before I was due to the parliamentary hearing, I had to have a stent done in my heart.
Because you've had stents put in before, haven't you?
Yes, but 6 days before the hearing, I had a stent put in. I didn't call Frank Field to postpone me going or try to avoid it and using that as an excuse. I went there and stood there, sat there for 6 hours, going through that. Hopefully, some people will recognise I stood up to what I had to go and do. I will continue to stand up to the things I'm being asked to do. And I want to get back to day job, finish up the things we've got to sort out and move on. Some people will recognise I stood up to what I had to go and do. I will continue to stand up to the things I'm being asked to do. And I want to get back to day job, finish up the things we've got to sort out and move on.
Sir Philip Green there will be speaking to our political editor, Robert Peston, shortly. But if Sir Philip really wants to fix the pensions problem at BHS, he needs to come up with enough money to convince the pensions regulator, as he was just mentioning. Today, it told our business editor, Joel Hills, it is still waiting for a credible proposal on paper. But News at 10 understands that if no deal is agreed in the next few weeks, the regulator intends to use its legal powers to reclaim the money. And they are not the only people wanting answers from Sir Philip.
BHS went bust a year after Sir Philip Green sold it. He's apologised for the hardship caused, but insists he's not to blame. Grant Atterby is one of 11,000 people who lost their jobs. He's still unemployed, and he holds Sir Philip responsible.
I do think it's not as a joke. Obviously, it should be taken away. I mean, having said that, that would just be a gesture. Obviously, what's really needed is sort of laws and changes in sort of attitude, so this sort of thing doesn't happen again.
Back in the summer, Sir Philip swept away from his appearance before MPs, promising to sort BHS's pension deficit. 20,000 former staff worry they'll receive less generous benefits. In the 4 months since Sir Philip Green appeared here, the position of BHS's pension scheme has worsened. There is no longer a company to support it, and the deficit has got even larger. Now, my understanding is Sir Philip has made several settlement proposals, but tonight, the pensions regulator told me it has yet to receive a credible and comprehensive written proposal, and that it's made clear to Sir Philip exactly what it wants. The MP who co-chaired the inquiry into BHS's failure has called on Sir Philip to deliver on his promise to rescue the pension scheme.
Months and months later, there's no actual concrete proposal before the regulator, which has to decide whether it's going to be a fair deal.
But Sir Philip says this is a complicated process. There are lots of moving parts. It's a necessarily long process.
Yes, lots of things are complicated, like dumping BHS, but ways were found.
BHS is dead, but the company's pension scheme isn't, and members are hoping it won't end in tears. ITV News understands if the pensions regulator can't reach a negotiated settlement with Sir Philip within the next few weeks, it intends to use its recovery powers to reclaim money. Joel Hills, News at 10.
And Robert is here with me now. Robert, I mean, he's fairly categorical, Sir Philip Green, in his long chat with you, that he wants to fix this pension black hole. How likely do you think it is that he will?
Quite difficult to judge. We have a pension regulator which is plainly worried about being accused by MPs, and in particular by Frank Field, the chairman of the Working Pensions Committee, of not getting enough from Philip Green. On the other hand, I've spoken to Philip Green this evening again, and he says that there is another scheduled meeting with the pension regulator to iron out what he calls technical difficulties, and he is very, very close to making the written formal offer that the pension regulator wants. So I think we are now, and people have wanted this for some time, very close to being able to make a judgment, a proper judgment, about whether Philip Green really will rescue this fund on which 20,000 people depend for their retirement income.
Indeed. I mean, so many things that he went through with you, but I mean, A, how did he seem to you in terms of what kind of scars it left on him, and what's at stake for him in this? I mean, there's not only the plugging the pension gap, there is also the question of his knighthood.
Well, I mean, it's been an extraordinary fall from grace for Sir Philip Green. I mean, you know,
incredibly successful man.
Only a few years ago, being courted by David Cameron to come in and advise the government on how to make the government more efficient, and now being attacked by the media on a daily basis, by MPs on a daily basis.
By the new Prime Minister?
By Theresa May. And the thing to bear in mind is, in business, confidence is everything. The confidence of your suppliers, the confidence of creditors, the confidence of customers. So he does have to sort this out. His reputation, not only as a successful businessman, but just, the ability to live here and not feel that he's public enemy number one is absolutely on the line.
Robert, thank you very much indeed. Fascinating interview. In the record books of criminal history, there was a new entry today under the heading "The youngest couple to have committed a double murder together." A girl has been found guilty of being a killer at the age of 14. Her boyfriend, also 14 at the time, had already admitted the same murders of a school dinner lady and her 13-year-old daughter at their home in Lincolnshire. It was the girl's plan, but in the end, she could not go through with it. She left it to the boy to stab and smother their victims.
Liz and Katie Edwards, a mother and her daughter, killed as they slept by murderers aged just 14.
You're not videoing this, are you?
In happier times, celebrating Christmas at home, the school dinner lady, whose daughter, just 13, died in the bedroom next to hers. Today, a jury returned guilty verdicts on 2 charges of murder.
What makes this case even more shocking is that these two were 14 years of age when they planned, committed these callous, senseless and unprovoked attacks on Elizabeth and Katie.
The killers can't be named for legal reasons, but it was the boy who brought a knife to the rear of this house as part of a plot hatched days before. The plan they agreed was for the boy to go to the house armed and in secret. On 3 consecutive nights he walked along this lonely riverside path with a bag of knives. On the first 2 nights he was unable to gain access to the house. On the 3rd night he managed to climb through an open window. This was the window through which he entered, and once he'd climbed inside this house, 5 Dawson Avenue, he moved through the property, armed with one of the knives and looking for the bedrooms of his victims. It was late at night, and they hadn't been woken by his entry. When the killer found the mother and daughter in their separate rooms, they were still asleep. He held the knife, but of the girl, the prosecution said that she was the driver of the conspiracy, that brutality and contempt oozes from every pore. Together with her young boyfriend, they planned and carried out cold, calculated and callous killings. Katie's father was in court to hear how her killers had a bath and watched television afterwards, leaving their murder weapon lying in the young girl's bedroom. In her police interview, the teenage girl described the killings as a breeze and said she felt fine. "I'd felt like murdering for quite a while," she added. "I was okay with it. Just the fact that it happened so quickly gave me peace of mind." But what happened to Liz has shocked the rest of the community where she lived.
She was very thoughtful. She understood how she could help people. She didn't just turn up. She was there and thinking about what was needed.
The couple who killed this mother and daughter made a pact to take their own lives afterwards, but instead ate ice cream and watched television, and are now no longer a couple. They each face a life behind bars. Damon Green, News at 10, Nottingham Crown Court.
After 2 years under the control of so-called Islamic State, the military effort to take back the Iraqi city of Mosul is continuing slowly but surely, with the US Central Command saying the noose is tightening. Tonight, President Obama addressed the coalition offensive on the city for the first time since it began yesterday, saying the Iraqi troops leading it were performing effectively and bravely, and the mission was a key milestone in his determination to dismantle Islamic State. Yesterday, Kurdish Peshmerga forces took 7 villages to the east of the city and Iraqi troops reclaimed 20 villages to the south. The militants' resistance has come in the form of mortar and small arms fire and suicide car bomb attacks. British, American and Turkish planes have been hitting targets from the air, one destroying a car bomb before it could strike.
Keeping enemy heads down. IS aren't far away, and the gunfire gives Kurdish soldiers the chance for a quick look over no man's land. They want a glimpse of home. These men are from what will be the next village liberated. Having fled from there in June 2014, they can hardly wait to return. It will be the happiest moment of my life, said 62-year-old Rad. But while some people will soon be going back home, others are having to flee. They have just left Mosul. There are few more dangerous undertakings than escaping the clutches of IS and crossing over, but they managed it carrying a few belongings and a white flag. Regarding the battle, with the help of coalition airstrikes still smouldering today, the Kurds did make important gains. Yesterday morning, and for 2 years preceding that, this road was a dual carriageway in the Islamic State. Now, under normal circumstances, the city of Mosul would be just 10 minutes drive away. However, for the time being, the advance here has been halted because advances elsewhere haven't gone so well. These Iraqi forces want to wait for their colleagues to catch up before pressing ahead. In a house in a captured village, we saw rooms full of piles of earth. IS go to great lengths to hide their tunnels from coalition drones. And these networks amounted to extensive living quarters underground. We saw only a fraction of one system in what is a small village. What must the defences in Mosul be like? These pictures emerged from there today, IS propaganda purportedly showing them ready for the fight. Taking the fight to them will be the Iraqi Mosul Brigade, which fled the city 2 years ago. The chance for redemption will soon be theirs. John Irvine, News at 10, Northern Iraq.
The effects on inflation of the weaker pound are yet to kick in, apparently, but even before they do, inflation jumped to its highest level for 2 years last month. It went up from 0.6% in August to 1% in September and is likely to keep heading upwards. One analyst advised people to do their Christmas shopping sooner rather than later before prices rise even further.
The honeymoon period of low inflation is on its way out. We're already feeling it, with price hikes at the petrol pump, in hotels and restaurants, and on the high street, with women's clothing being hit the hardest. And these increases are already being felt by shoppers like Vivine White, who's worried about what lies ahead.
It is very to think from now what the future might, have in store, to start cutting back now where you can, so you're ready for the changes that are probably going to come.
There have been three main drivers for inflation so far. The cost of petrol went up by 1.2 pence per litre between August and September. Restaurants and hotel prices also went up by an average of 0.7%. But the biggest jump was the cost of clothing and footwear, which rose by 6%. And some experts are advising us to plan ahead in a very practical way.
It might be an idea to start buying early for Christmas, because it's possible that prices will be somewhat higher by the time we get to December.
A tumbling pound and a reliance on imports means prices are bound to increase even more.
We're still spending, but the worry is that prices will continue to go up and our wages won't increase at the same rate. And that would be bad news, not only for us, because we'd in effect have less money to spend, but also for businesses who'd face a double whammy. Their costs would be going up at the same time as their customers would be tightening their belts.
Inflation hits hardest those for whom money is already short. But today's figures are the first signs that we all may be facing a bitter winter. Narina Hertz, News at 10.
Plane passengers and people who live near Gatwick and Heathrow airports have been waiting for months, years even, to find out which of the two is to get a new runway. Well, it's going to be Heathrow. Probably we'll know more next week. And our deputy political editor, Chris Shipp, joins me now from Downing Street. Chris, how do you read this? Is this the third runway for Heathrow, do you think?
Well, Raggy, the Cabinet spoke about the issue of airport expansion for a full hour today, and that's because this isn't just an issue for people living around Gatwick or Heathrow. It's connected to everything the government has been telling us about leaving the European Union and connecting with new trading partners around the world. So at the end of Cabinet, Number 10 announced that they would make a decision next week, in 7 days' time. The reason we think they're opting for Heathrow's third runway rather than Gatwick's second runway is because of the special measures they've put in place to deal with the vociferous opponents of Heathrow, Boris Johnson, the Foreign Secretary, being one, Justine Greening, the Education Secretary, being another. We don't think they would have had to do that if they were opting for Gatwick. It means Boris and Justine can continue to oppose Heathrow even after it's announced. But then this afternoon, Downing Street announced that there would be a full year of consultation and MPs wouldn't vote on this plan until the winter of 2017-18, so quite some way away. So look, I think we're going to get a decision next week. It will be Heathrow, I think. But if you listen very carefully, Raggy, you can just about hear the sound of the can being kicked further down the road.
Indeed you can, Chris. Thanks very much indeed. The current residents of the White House had some hard-hitting advice to would-be President Donald Trump. Stop whining about the election being rigged, President Obama said, and get on with it. With Mr. Trump's attitude to women so much a focus now in the closing stages of the campaign, the Republican candidate clearly felt the woman who could become his first lady might swing things back his way. Melania Trump agreed in a television interview. He had said what she called dirty and bad stuff, but said that this was simply boy talk after he had been egged on, she said.
My husband is kind and he's a gentleman, and he would never do that. That everything was organized and put together to hurt him, to hurt his candidacy.
Finally, you wait all summer for an Olympic and Paralympic parade and then, well, you know the rest. So today, the celebrations moved from rain to shine, from Manchester to London. The sun was out most of the time in Trafalgar Square, but the turnout wasn't as big as yesterday's. But later, gold medal winners like Nicola Adams and Kadina Cox got to meet the Queen at a special reception at Buckingham Palace. Swimmer Adam Peaty got to show off his medal, and there was a special word for equestrian Nick Skelton from a fellow horse enthusiast. That's it from me. Julie will be here tomorrow. Until then, from me and everyone on the programme, a very good night.